Hello, everybody. It is Victoria from Become Your Best Self and Transform Your Life at creativehealingandwellness.com. As promised, I am here for our Wednesday video as we wait until some of you guys come on. I'm just going to ramble just a little bit. I'm going to apologize now so I don't have to apologize during the video. I have my windows open. I'm on the front porch. It's going to get loud on occasion, so I'm going to apologize for that right now. As the cars go by, it is close to rush hour here, and I live on a busy corner. So, today I am going to be talking about what I think is probably the foundation of most of the things that we struggle with in our lives. And that is shame. And typically today I'm going to talk about the difference between shame versus guilt. A lot of times I think we get those two very confused because we have, I guess, our perceptions on how we should be or what's supposed to happen and all that stuff. So, hi Lori! How are you? So I want to start this whole video with a quote from Brené Brown. I've been actually learning an awful lot from her lately. She kind of is speaking my language about what I want to bring to you and how I would like my coaching to look like in the future. So the quote I have, and I do have notes, so I looked down. I apologize. I wanted to make sure I got the information together and I didn't ramble too much. So the quote is from Brené Brown. Shame is not guilt. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame is I am bad. Guilt says I did something bad. So guilt also says I'm sorry, I made a mistake, but shame says I am a mistake. Shame is highly correlated with addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide, and eating disorders. Guilt inversely correlates with those things. The ability to hold something we've done or failed to do up against who we want to be is incredibly adaptive. It's uncomfortable, but it's adaptive. And that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview. Adele, I gotta get... Oh, well, okay, yeah, watch it on the replay. This is going to be good stuff. Shame versus guilt. It's awesome. So, with that quote in mind, how do we overcome guilt and shame? How does that happen? So, I think the first thing we need to do when it comes to these things, we need to define. Hearts back, Adele. Love ya. We need to kind of expand on the definition of what both shame and guilt is. Guilt is a cognitive or an emotional experience that occurs when a person realizes or believes, accurately or not, that he or she has compromised his or her own standards of conduct or has violated a moral standard and bears significant responsibility for that violation. Examples. I've done something bad or wrong. I didn't do enough. This is your gut reaction when you behave a certain way. And this can actually have a positive outcome. Guilt is a good thing because it puts us in a position of saying, let me switch this and let me be better next time. So it can have a positive outcome. Now, shame, on the other hand, is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And some of those examples are, I am bad, or I am wrong. I am not enough. And it's actually a judgment on ourselves. It's us judging ourselves. And this has a very negative and destructive effect. And there's one quote I found, which is really cool. It's from Anais Nin. Shame is the lie someone told you about yourself. Okay? So think about that for a second. Somebody must have said something in your life. Hi, Lee. How are you? Somebody said something to you in your life that you kind of took on yourself as part of your identity. Yes, Sydney. It's probably really early in Sydney, huh? It's like 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But these things are lies. This is like somebody else's perception of you and not who you really are. So shame is a lie someone told you about yourself. That's something to kind of think about. So, what? Oh, 6:30? So, knowing those two definitions. And, I also think that a lot of times shame comes out in lots of ways. Perfectionism is shame. Because you feel like you're not good enough, so you have to control everything and you have to be perfect. Because if you're not perfect, you're not going to be good enough. So that's kind of an example of how I believe that shame is really the foundation of a lot of the things that we struggle with in our lives. Little people get me up, at least not 5. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So what are the steps to what we're going to call recovery from shame and guilt? Now, there are 4 steps, and they kind of all weave together. And it starts with, number 1, own your shame and acknowledge your experience. Okay? That sounds really hard. And a lot of us don't want to own it. I can tell you, I won't go into detail because I'm still processing through it. But I had an experience. Hi, Vicki. I had an experience when I was 18 years old. And this experience rocked my world, changed my world, and affected me so deeply that here at 46 years old, almost 47, I'm still struggling with it. And part of the work I did last week included that. I had realized that I never owned my story. This traumatic event that happened to me, I never owned it. Hi, Melissa. I never owned it. I never took, I guess, I'm trying to think of the words to think about it. But in a sense, I detached so far from it that it was kind of like me watching a movie. It wasn't me watching myself, like when I thought back in the memory. I was watching a movie. And I had realized that this past week that this has caused an awful lot of problems. I never owned it. As horrible as it is, I never owned it. And you have to own it. And you also have to realize, one of the things, you have to name it. I actually had to specifically say what it was because I was using other words to lessen the trauma. So I didn't name it. And I didn't own it. I would talk about it, but I was so far removed from it that it didn't affect me. So that's like the first step. You have to name it. You have to talk about it. You have to own your story. And then you have to tell your story. I'm still working on that part with this particular thing. I'm still working on that part. Because I haven't quite gone through the steps. But this is the first step. This is the first step. It's a really, really hard, difficult step. But we, as I mentioned in our last video, we are our experiences. They make us who we are. These things that come into our lives, they are our lessons. They are, no matter how horrible as they seem, they are the stepping stones to transformation. So that's step one. Name it, talk about it, own it, and tell it. Number two, allow your imperfections. Now, these don't have to be in order, but allow your imperfections. Let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. We put these things on ourselves, like we have to be this way, or we have to be this way, or oh, I have to behave this way with my family because they won't like me if I don't. We have to let those go. We just have to. So allow your imperfections. Number three, embrace and practice the gifts of imperfection. Now, I call those the 3 C's. I've found it. Brene Brown talks about it. I've seen a couple other different people when I was doing the research for this. I found a couple other people that also use Brene's little thing. But the 3 C's are courage, compassion, and connection. Practicing these 3 things in our daily lives is how we cultivate worthiness. And worthiness, obviously, is kind of what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be worthy because, as we were saying last week, we are made from stardust. We are children of God. We are worthy of all of the riches and all of the blessings and all of the amazing things that this world has to offer us. So, cultivating these 3 C's is how we do that. Now, just to expand, courage is cultivating the courage to be emotionally honest, to set boundaries, learn how to say no, and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Now, there's that scary V word. Vulnerable is also being scary. And that's part of number 1. When you own your story and talk about it and tell your story, you are being vulnerable. Courage is being able to be vulnerable. Okay, compassion. Exercising compassion that comes from the knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle, and we are all connected to each other through a loving, resilient human spirit. Okay, so compassion. I always talk about this, walking around with an open heart, being love in this world, being the light in somebody's darkness. That's all part of compassion. And the last C of the 3 C's is connection. Nurture the connections and the sense of belonging that can only happen when we let go of what we are supposed to be and embrace who we are. Like I said, everything kind of goes into everything else. So this connection part is part of 2. Get rid of what you think you're supposed to be or what somebody tells you you're supposed to be like. Because that's not the rule. That's not the truth. That's not you. That's somebody else. That's somebody else's perspective on how you should be. And that is not being authentic. So number 4. Now this is the big one. And this is how I'm going to end this little mini training for the most part. Is living wholeheartedly. Begin living wholeheartedly. And I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read this because I wrote this out last night and I really liked it. So, wholehearted people tend to have a strong sense of worthiness and a strong sense of love and belonging. Wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from this place of worthiness. It means cultivating the 3 C's to wake up and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am still enough. And to go to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect, and vulnerable and sometimes afraid. But that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and I'm also worthy of love and belonging. I love that. Living wholeheartedly. And that's kind of what living with an open heart is. So I found a kind of a picture on Pinterest, and it had the 10 guidelines of wholehearted living. And it kind of tells us what we need to cultivate and what we need to release. So it's 10 things that we need to cultivate and 10 things we need to release. So glasses again so I can fully read. So what do we cultivate and what do we release? We cultivate, number one, these are the top 10 things that we need to cultivate for wholehearted living. We need to cultivate authenticity. We need to cultivate self-compassion, resilient spirit, gratitude and joy, intuition and faith, and trusting faith, creativity, play and rest, calm and stillness, meaningful work, and 10, I love number 10, laughter, song, and dance. That's what we need to cultivate. Well, let me just repeat those again, because I want you guys to get this. This is what we need to cultivate to live wholeheartedly. Number 1, authenticity. Number 2, self-compassion. Number 3, resilient spirit. Number 4, gratitude and joy. 5, intuition and faith. 6, creativity. 7, play and rest. 8, calm and stillness. 9, meaningful work. 10, laughter, song, and dance. Those, I mean, just think about, just kind of imagine, if you were to cultivate all of those things, how would your life look? Is that what you want to, is that the person you want to be? Is that the life you want to live? I would hope so. Because when you do those, guess what comes? Pure joy comes from cultivating those things. Now, here's the hard part. This is the release list. We need to release, number 1, what people think. Number 2, perfectionism. Number 3, numbing vulnerability and powerlessness. And I'll get to the numbing vulnerability in a little bit. Number 4, scarcity and fear. Number 5, the need for certainty. Number 6, comparison. Number 7, using exhaustion and productivity as a marker of self-worth. Think about that one. How many times do we think, oh, I didn't get this done, I guess I'm not good enough? Or we say to ourselves, oh, I'm so stupid, I should have thought better and planned better. You need to let go of that. You need to release that. Number 8, anxiety as a lifestyle. Think about that. How many people do you know that live their life in almost perpetual anxiety? We need to release that. Self-doubt. We need to release self-doubt. And we need to remove, part of that I wanted to add, is we need to remove the words from our vocabulary like supposed to and need to. You don't supposed to do anything. You don't need to do anything. You would like to get something done. Or it would be nice if this got done. You don't supposed to do anything. You don't need to do anything. So remove those. Release the self-doubt. And number 10, being cool and always in control. Stop that. Stop that. Stop that. Stop that. You don't need to be in control. You don't need to be in control. Fully embrace being vulnerable. Oh my gosh. Just fully embrace it. All your imperfections, all of your beautiful quirks, and all of your beautiful things that make you you. They make you you. So don't control anything. Just don't. Just let go. Let go. You will find so much freedom. So fully embrace being vulnerable. What makes you vulnerable makes you beautiful. I'm going to say that again. What makes you vulnerable makes you beautiful. Get that in your head. It's okay to be vulnerable. I struggle with it. I know it's not easy. I really know it's not easy. Oh my goodness, it's probably one of the hardest things in the world is to be vulnerable. But most of us, we all kind of share the same thing. Our natural behavior is to numb this vulnerability. We don't want to experience being vulnerable. We don't want to feel the feelings. We don't want to feel the fear. We don't want to feel exposed. So we tend to make everything uncertain, certain. Perfectionism, control. We begin to blame ourselves and others when things aren't going well. And we immediately try to perfect and control everything. These are, when you find yourself doing that, know that that's you avoiding being vulnerable. I struggle with it all the time, and I'm trying really hard to be more vulnerable because I've been so guarded my whole life. I'm like one of those people that you would call a survivor. Been through a lot of crap. Crawled my way out of the dark. I'm a survivor. And when you tend to live that way, you tend to be very guarded. So I struggle with being vulnerable. But, these videos that I do here, this helps me. This helps me be vulnerable. And I appreciate you holding this space for me as I tell you some of these stories. But I just want to tell you that there is a way out of this whole shame and guilt cycle. And there are 4 things that you can use to help you do that. Number 1, let yourself be vulnerable. I can't express that enough. Number 2, love with your whole heart. Your whole heart. Practice gratitude and joy. You know that I'm a big one on that one. And always, 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 and I will pound this into your head. And pound and pound and pound until you get it. Believe that you are enough. Believe it in your deepest parts of your soul and the deepest parts of your heart. Believe that you are enough. So I hope that little mini training was a lot of information, and I hope it resonated with you. But yeah, own your story, be vulnerable, and live wholeheartedly. Release those things that we hold like, oh my gosh, we don't have to be what somebody else says we're supposed to be. That's you not being you. I've mentioned it before in another video. We are all unique. We're here for a very specific reason. We all have a job. As Deepak Chopra tells us, we're all the puzzle piece in the great big jigsaw puzzle. And, you can't put a piece that's over in this corner all the way up in this corner because it's not going to fit. So, and yes, Melissa, always be positive. Just because you're being vulnerable does not mean you have to be guarded, like emotionally. It's like, and I know that sounds like kind of a contradiction, but a lot of times we kind of dip our toe into being vulnerable, but we still have these walls up because you're afraid to just let go. And I can promise you, letting go is what is going to bring you joy and bring you the positivity. And the more positive you think, it's kind of one of those things, you fake it till you make it. When you're searching for joy and when you're searching for happiness, the more positive you can twist things. If you get a thought in your head where you're being a monster to yourself, just twist it. Twist it. Just make it positive and say it. See how that feels. So now I know I kind of went over what I wanted to do. I wanted that to be more like a 20-minute thing. But so we can open the floor for about 10 minutes for questions. I can't stay very long because my husband is going to take me out for dinner. Yay! 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock reservations. I get prime rib tonight. So excited. If you have any questions, now would be the time. And you don't have to just ask questions about what I just talked about. You can ask me other questions. So I know we got 3 people on here. So if you have, or at least I think there's 3 people here. Yeah, positivity is key. Definitely, Lee. You know, it's sometimes it's hard. You know, especially in our darkest days, it's really hard to find positivity. It's really hard to find it in our darkest days. But you know what? There's always something positive. There's always something positive. Is guilt and shame the same? No, they are not. They are absolutely not. Just to kind of read the descriptions. Guilt is, and here's what I said earlier, guilt is a cognitive or an emotional experience that occurs when a person realizes or believes, accurately or not, that he or she has compromised his or her own standards of conduct or has violated a moral standard and bears significant responsibility for that violation. And as Brene Brown says, guilt is incredibly adaptive, and it's actually pretty. Guilt has a role. Guilt allows us to correct our behavior. It is a behavior thing, and shame, on the other hand, is completely opposite. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And just to kind of give you some of the things, when you feel shame, you're saying things like, I am bad, or I am wrong, or I'm stupid, or, you know, some of the things that we tell ourselves. That's shame. Guilt, on the other hand, is something like, I should have done that better. Or, you know, I should have been there for them. It's a behavior. It's not internalized. And with shame, with guilt, you can actually use that behavior as a way to kind of shift and adjust, if that makes any sense. And shame, shame is negative. It's really destructive. Shame is the basis of most things like addictions and depression and I had a list here. Let me see. Yeah, addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide, and eating disorders. Those are all based in shame. Because we feel like if I don't have this, if I don't drink, people aren't going to like me. Because I'm not good enough without it. Depression is when you go for such a long time feeling that nobody likes you and you're not good enough. And when you ask yourself questions like, why don't people like me? I had a problem with that most of my life. And, you know, I never felt I was good enough. And it's kind of the reason why I'm into this new field of dealing with shame and guilt and learning that we are and teaching that we are enough as we are. Because shame is permeated in our society and people avoid it. It's a taboo thing. And men and women handle shame differently. Women tend to just kind of go inside and beat ourselves up and we're just monsters to ourselves. Men, on the other hand, when they feel shame, they shut down. They completely shut down or they lash out. So it's very different, but it's very destructive. So all negative self-talk. That's shame. That is shame. Guilt is actually pretty good. You know, you just don't want to get stuck in that hamster wheel of guilt. Because then you go down the rabbit hole and then, you know, and then the guilt can turn to shame. Guilt should be used as a guideline for a shift in behavior. So, do we have any other questions? I can go until about 10 after 5. Or we can close up early. depending on what you guys have. So, any other questions? I mean, I know I kind of, I'm really bad at like giving little bits of information. I tend to go all in, so I give a lot of information. But I really want, you guys to get value. So that is my way. But if any questions, I'm here. They don't have to be about guilt and shame. They can be about anything. And I don't know who is still here. I know Lee is here. I'm sure Melissa is still here, but I do not know who the third person is. I have a 3 on the top of my screen. So if you're still here, give me a thumbs up. Give me an emoji. I don't really have, those scrolling little things. Oh, Lori's still here. Yes! Awesome! I love it when you show up, Lori. Yeah, so... Maureen! Hi, Maureen! How are you? Yeah, so, ask me any questions. I'm here for you, at least for the next 5 minutes, before I go get my prime rib for the night. Has anybody had anything that's happened in the last week that they may want a little support with? I'm here for that too. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about guilt and shame. So anything? And here's where I always say this, here's the awkward part where you're just sitting here waiting and all you hear are crickets. But that's okay. It just means I'm doing my job. So I guess we'll give it one more minute. And if there's no questions, we can close this and we can, I'll get started on what's going to come next week. Actually, next week might be a tough one because I'm working. So if I can get in here another time, I will for you guys. But next week's my busy week. Working till 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. So, yes. The crickets. I'm so good at my job. I love teaching you guys. I really do. It definitely, it brings me joy being able to share, my experiences with you. It brings me lots of joy. So if we have no other questions, you're very welcome, Lee. I guess we can close up for this, tonight. And, hopefully anybody who's watching this on the replay, thank you for watching. And to all of you, thank you for being here with me. I enjoy hanging out with you guys. It definitely is a highlight of my day. So, yes, you have a wonderful day, Lee. Your day is just getting started. So, as always, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and walk in love and light. And be the best version of you. Love you all. Bye-bye. Have a great night. Bye-bye.